Well, good morning. Bob Kerrigan with you for the Law Show this morning, this Sunday morning. Glad to have you with us. We have a lot on the agenda today to cover, including text messages we've received from some of you all about questions that you have and issues that we are going to discuss today. Now, last week, I talked about the racial and ethnic disparities in fetal deaths and had some interesting responses to this. We talked about the overwhelming disparity between African American women and Hispanic women and white women in terms of fetal mortality. So one of the articles that was sent to me came from a publication called Medpage Today. Thank you for the person that sent it. I don't know who this person was. We just have their text number, and so they didn't give us any initials or their name. And we will not put somebody's name on the air or their phone number or any private information when you communicate with us. But if you want us to designate your name or your identity or whatever, we'll look at that and consider that if it's appropriate. So this was a fascinating story and a troubling story to me, and it was this. A black doctor died after giving birth, underscoring maternal mortality crisis. Now, this is a young woman that was in Indiana University, and the article starts with members of the medical community at Indiana University School of Medicine are mourning the loss of Shanice Wallace, MD, a fourth-year pediatric chief resident there, after she died from pregnancy complications last week. And this article has some fascinating facts in it. The death of Shanice Wallace, a black woman, highlights a tragic trend in pregnancy and childbirth outcomes in the United States. About 700 women die from pregnancy-related causes each year. Astounding, is it, in the United States? 700 women. And the maternal mortality rate is higher in the U.S. than in any other industrialized country in the world. Shocking, really, isn't it? People of color die from pregnancy at an alarming rate, with Black, Native American, and Alaska Native women 2 to 3 times as likely to die during pregnancy than white women. But let's go back to the underscoring problem here, and that is 700 women dying in the United States at a rate that's higher than any other industrialized country in the world. So this is a very, very big problem in the United States, and it's the sub part of that problem is the disparity between African American women, Native American women, Asian women, compared to white women in the United States. Black birther mortality is yet another public health crisis that the U.S. has allowed to persist for too long, said Farah Amway Fullerton, a fourth-year medical student at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, said on Twitter in response to Dr. Wallace's death. Racial disparities, this article goes on to say, in maternal mortality outcomes may occur in part because of the chronic stress that people of color endure from constant discrimination, which can take a toll on their health, a concept called weathering. I'd never heard of this before, never heard of this concept before. This article was sent to me and apparently is fairly well known in the minority communities. You can be a healthy black woman and still have a higher risk of maternal mortality, this physician said. What Dr. Wallace unfortunately highlights is that it's not based on access to care alone. Very troubling article that was sent to me, and thank you to whoever did send it, and send along anything else of interest on the subject. We're glad to look at it and possibly cover it. I'm going to finish my discussion of the grand jury in a few minutes that we started last week. We talked about what a statewide grand jury did. And I want to talk about the NSAIDs and the problems for pregnant women. We'll cover that. Maybe not get to it till this next part of the show in the second 15-minute segment. The Law Show is brought to you by Kerrigan, Rankin, McLeod, and Thompson. We're a regional law firm specializing in serious injury and death cases. The Law Show is a public service that we provide to talk about the legal issues. And of course, it's an advertisement for our firm, obviously, because we are telling you about our qualifications to handle the kinds of cases that we do handle, which are serious injury and death claims from a variety of sources. Whatever that source might be, we've handled them all. Train accidents, airplane accidents, products liability cases, dangerous products, defective products, defective crane and industrial equipment products. We've handled medical malpractice cases and the typical kind of automobile accident cases that you see lawyers advertising for. And then they're advertising for those cases because they're easier than some of these other cases, and that is products liability cases, medical malpractice cases, an airplane crash or a train crash or a trucking accident or whatever. Those are all much more complicated. So lawyers are all scrambling to try to represent people in accident cases, again, because it's fairly easy work. An automobile accident case is not usually that complicated. Sometimes you have to get an accident reconstruction expert involved, try to figure out precisely how it happened. Now, we had a case not too long ago where it appeared initially that a mother with 3 children traveling from South Florida to see her mother in Mississippi rear-ended a commercial truck, like a dump truck, on the interstate. And tragic accident, just terrible injuries to her and her family. And when we first got in the case, you say, well, that's a rear end collision. I mean, it was her fault. Obviously, she ran into the rear end of the car, rear end of the truck. But what we learned from a device in the modern cars, there's electronic devices that record everything. And so after an accident, we can go retrieve that data and figure out precisely what happened. And what happened in that case was this dump truck on the road had no adequate lighting, and it was either stopped or going at 1 mile an hour. She was traveling under the speed limit and encountered this truck with absolutely no warning at night and struck it. And so we were able to make a very substantial recovery for her, and the insurance company agreed with us that the at-fault party was the trucking company that owned the truck. And so we made that recovery. So my point is, with these electronic devices in the cars, data recording devices, we can sometimes figure things out that at first blush don't look like the person that was injured in the accident, doesn't look like that they were at fault. It looks like they were at fault, and we get these electronic data things printed out, and it shows us that they were not at fault, or the other party was partly at fault. So my point is that is all available to you now. In the old days, it was very, very hard to reconstruct these kinds of accidents, just almost impossible to go back and figure things out, just like that trucking accident I talked to you about. It was more difficult to do. But now, with electronic data that's in these vehicles, you can recover things pretty fast. So and shed light on how the accident happened. So we got several text messages this last week and emails, but I'll just cover some of the text messages. We try to respond to everybody, even though it might not be in an area that we handle. We make referrals to other lawyers or law firms that we know are specialists in different fields. Ours is limited to these accident claims, but we refer people who text us to other lawyers. But here's just a few of them. This lady said, I bought a brand new construction home. Most couples in the neighborhood have had their issues resolved from the inspections with the builder. She felt that I'm not getting repairs resolved by the builder and have asked over and over for things to be done. It's been over a year. What can be done? Well, I called her and talked to her and made a suggestion about notifying the builder in writing with a registered letter setting forth precisely what needs to be fixed. And that doesn't guarantee the builder's going to do it, but when the builder has it, it helps the builder, can schedule the work that needs to be done, But if you have somebody who's just obstructive and just not going to do it no matter what, well, then you've given them adequate opportunity to address the problem, and then you consult a lawyer, unfortunately, and you have to get a lawyer involved. But I'm hoping that that helped to resolve that. This was a fascinating inquiry to me. He said, you take cases for HIV meds that have been recalled for bone damage. I'm now in a wheelchair due to an HIV medication that I took, not knowing it was causing my hips to lose blood and cause severe damage. I need total hip replacement. Well, several issues about this. The immediate reaction, of course, to the average person is, well, if you have HIV, that's too bad. And there's not much sympathy for the person, which is most unfortunate. But what I did find, the person that wrote to me had the wrong medication. The medication that has been subject to lawsuits in California is called tenofovir, tenofovir, I guess is how you pronounce it. And it has caused serious kidney damage and bone loss, very similar to what this person wrote to me about. But the medication they said they were taking was this tenofovir was never sold under the name of the medication that this person had written us about. But I responded to them and told them about these claims that if in fact that's what they were taking, the argument or the case is that the manufacturer of the drugs knew that they had a much, much better drug available, but they were making so much money from the sale of this drug that they didn't put out the other drug that would cause much less, if any, damage at all. So there may be something to that. But I thought that was one of the more interesting inquiries. This lady said her mother was transferred from a nursing home to an assisted living facility 9 days before the end of the month, but they'd paid for the end of the month. So anyway, the long and short of it is the nursing home wouldn't give them the 9 days they prepaid back because there was some transfers in and out. So I told her what to do. Again, you write a registered letter. You set forth in the letter precisely what your claim is. And then I told her about filing a small claims action, going to the clerk of the court in the county where she lived, and they would assist in her making a small claims filing against this facility to recover the 9 days that they had prepaid. This is the Law Show. Bob Kerrigan with you. In our second half, we're going to go back to the federal grand jury, talk about the differences between the federal and state grand jury, and cover some other interesting subjects, include the NSAIDs.